seat.
Facebook then like the live stream. Facebook
So, to begin, I just want to do a quick introduction of the team here. First and foremost, my name is Dylan Scheck-Snyder. I am the victims list and outreach specialist at USERV. And what that means is I cover detainee issues and prisoner issues. So it's very great being here with you here today to discuss this. I'd like to turn it over to my other colleague to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamie Staley. I work as a supervisory policy advisor at USERV. I help coordinate USERV's policy recommendations and oversee a team on Eurasia and East Asia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Wiener. I'm also a supervisory policy analyst at USERV, and my area of focus is the Arabian Peninsula and Europe.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to try to keep this presentation as short as possible because we do hope this to be a discussion. We do want to take audience questions about these issues, and looking forward to your participation. So, to begin though, this session is about the freedom of religion or belief victims list that USERV has. So, what is this list? Essentially what it is a database full of prisoners of conscience who are imprisoned, detained, disappeared, forced to renounce their faith, and that's important. The database is in alignment with what Congress has required us to do as part of our reporting on international religious freedom. I will read you this piece of legislation right here. However, there are some points I do want to emphasize. As required by Congress, USERV is to collect the names of individuals as they are publicly available. So we pull names from local NGOs, we pull names from media reports. Any public information about prisoners we are required to include in our database. The second note is to the extent practical. Sometimes it's difficult finding information on prisoners, especially in English, so we can't cover everyone, unfortunately, as much as we try to do so. I mentioned those 6 categories as well: imprisoned, detained, disappeared, under house arrest, forced to renounce their faith, as well as tortured. These are the requirements. This database does not typically cover violence of any sort directed towards religious minority groups. It is very, very specific, but these are the concrete measures laid out in the legislation. Additionally, we have additional, what you would call stipulations. We do not cover, this database does not cover every single country in the world. We are required to cover countries that USERV recommends for CPC status, special watch list status, and EPC status. Now, I'm sure you all are familiar with the CPC status, country of particular concern, as well as the EPC, entity of particular concern. These are designations or recommendations USERV makes the State Department to designate countries based off of religious freedom violations. So, and last but not least, there is a privacy element. This database does have a privacy feature. We were able to take names anonymously so that in the event. So, one point to highlight, what is a religious prisoner of conscience? Well, for USERV stand, the legislation specifically lays out religious belief, religious advocacy, and religious freedom. Long story short though, we review all the names we receive individually on an individual basis, and we are looking directly to see if there's a religious element to an individual's imprisonment. This can be related to their own practices. It can also be related to the state imposing its own interpretations of religious practice on them. Now, I'm a huge numbers nerd. These are the numbers in our database. We currently have 1,548 individuals cataloged in our database. I don't know if you all can see them right there. This is probably a better image for you to look at. Now, I need to emphasize, this should not be interpreted as a global trend. This should not be interpreted as the country with the most prisoners. This is simply the numbers we receive, primarily based off of NGOs we receive submissions for, right? So we receive names from people like you, right? We review those cases, we look at them, and we catalog them. So we are dependent upon you, and thus our information reflects the information given. Now, as you can see, China makes up the vast majority of the individuals in our database, unfortunately. Second to Russia, Iran, but you'll also see Eritrea, India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam as well. The rest of the countries we covered that you probably saw on that list are grouped together as other. The first category was based off of country. This chart is based off of religion. And so you do see, we try our best to make sure we are doing our best to be inclusive of as many people as possible based off of the various different faiths. From a conglomerate standpoint, this is where it would break out if we were to group them based off of their general terms. So Muslim Ahmadiyya, Muslim Sunni, Muslim Shia, Muslim Quranists, unspecified, as well as Christians, Protestants, Orthodox, Catholics. So as you see here, Muslims account for the majority in our database, followed closely by Christians, as well as Falun Gong practitioners, Buddhists, Baha'is, unknowns or unspecified, and then other. Now, one thing that I'm very excited for is that our database is about to have some very new, very cool features coming soon. I'm talking about a very robust search engine that will allow you to type in whatever keyword you would like to find and then filter that based off of things you may find of interest, such as a person's ethnicity or person's religion, the country they're from. But we are also hoping to include two very important categories, and this has to do, I would say, with how we look at data, right? And what are some of the interesting data points we're looking at when it comes to the prosecution of religious groups. So that would be the nature of the charges. What are people being charged for? And surprisingly enough, you'd be surprised. It's terrorism, sedition, blasphemy, apostasy. There's a whole range of stuff. Arms trafficking, drug dealing. I mean, it's really remarkable, and every country is unique in how they do it. And then additionally, we also hope to add a category for reason of persecution. So really get specific, are they being arrested because of their religious identity, their religious belief, their religious activity, are they reporting on religious freedom conditions, are they protesting religious freedom conditions, and so there's a lot of good data that would be very helpful to know, that we hope to be available very soon. And last but not least, I emphasized this earlier, we are dependent upon civil society organizations to submit names to us. Our team, while we're very proud of our team, it's not the largest team. And so we can use help finding names. Of course, we do our independent vetting. But if you are familiar with anyone that you think we should be able to include in our database, you think it's safe, you think it would be for a good cause, please, you can go to our website right here. So you go to the database's website, scroll down to the bottom, it has a section that says Submit Victim Information. You fill out a form, you submit it, it gets sent to me. Or after today, if you think you have someone you know, please reach out to me, come talk to me. And I'd be more than happy to give you my contact information and work on this issue. So without further ado, we will be opening it up to questions, although I will ask my colleagues the first two questions. So, Jamie, you begin the first one. So I just went over all those numbers, right? Looks really cool, really interesting. But what are some of the strategies and ways USERP does advocacy for prisoners? Because this database is not an advocacy database. It is purely what we find based off public reporting. USERP also engages, though, in more aggressive advocacy efforts. So, Jamie, you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in addition to the database, we also do a wide range of advocacy activities on behalf of religious prisoners of conscience all around the world. So I can kind of walk you through what that process looks like a little bit. It starts with hearing from members of civil society and NGOs and different people like that who are raising cases with us and bringing them to our attention. So I mean, we have analysts covering all these different countries around the world, but it's we're not going to know about every single person who is in prison. So we really rely on all these partners to bring this information up to us. And with that, we quickly do our own vetting process, but then meet with the family members of the religious prisoner of conscience, taking very seriously the principle of doing no harm and making sure that we're not raising a case that a family member doesn't want us to raise, or feeling like raising it would actually hurt the person's release or treatment in prison in some way. From there, some of our public activities are doing press statements, press releases, tweets, events, a wide range of ways to highlight these different cases. And we also raise them with U.S. government officials, with our own State Department, and with international organizations and officials in those sort of forum. And then we also raise it with the government that the person is imprisoned in. If we have a diplomatic relationship and we're talking with that government, then we raise it and try to see if there's a way to at least get them released or get better medical conditions or support or things along those lines. One strategy that we found was really effective, particularly in Uzbekistan, was bringing up these cases with our own embassy, the Uzbek embassy here in the U.S., and raising specific cases, and then they would look into them themselves. We actually had several times where they said, don't put it out publicly yet, please don't say anything, we'll look into it. They looked into it, they verified it, and then they released several different religious prisoners of conscience in that way. That we never put anything out publicly about it, but it was done behind the scenes, and it was a great partnership with our partners in the Uzbek government to do that. So we also work closely with Congress to raise these cases, so that members of Congress can put out statements or tweets or do floor speeches. There's a great project, the Defending Freedoms Project, done by the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission in Congress, that allows for members of Congress to advocate on behalf of specific prisoners of conscience, not just religious, but including religious as well, where a member of Congress will take up a certain case and really push for it while they're a member there. I worked on the Hill for a while, and my boss had taken up a Chinese prisoner of conscience, and over that time, over a couple of years, actually, we did see him released to house arrest at least, and it really did make a difference, and it made a huge difference for someone on the other side of the world who's in prison to hear that a member of Congress is speaking about them on the floor of the House of Representatives or something like that, that they're not forgotten. So yeah, that's a really effective way as well. And then lastly, we try to, when we can, travel to the country and actually meet, if we can't meet with the prisoner themselves, but meet with their family, meet with their lawyer, understand it more, see if there's any way that we can be helpful in that forum. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of our advocacy efforts and process from start to finish, and there's a lot of different activities, and very cautiously trying to move things forward to make a difference on some of these things.
Thanks, Jamie. Following Jamie's answer, I wanted to ask Scott a question. Like I said, there's a lot of data in the database, and data is only good insofar as you know how to use it and what information you have. So Scott, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the steps USERF can take to hold violators accountable?
Sure. So the reason that the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom was created in 1998 was to monitor religious freedom conditions worldwide, but also to make recommendations to Congress and the administration about promoting religious freedom. So it's not only saying what's going on, it's recommending what the U.S. government branch agency is so important. We can say that we disagree with what the administration is doing or push Congress, and so that independence is a really powerful aspect of our advocacy for prisoners. So there are a few policies that we kind of come back to over and over again. Firstly, when individual high-ranking officials, this can be judges, it can be the heads of prisons, and we believe that this holds accountable those who are responsible for the severe mistreatment of people because they're part of a religious minority or different. So for many years in Iran, USERF has recommended they would impose egregiously long sentences on religious minorities, members of the Baha'i community, the Gunabadi Sufi community, Christians, in particular Christian converts from Islam. And so we were very pleased to see the State Department designate all three of those judges after many months of advocacy, in fact many years of advocacy on USERF's part. Secondly, we recommend legislation. We don't advocate, but we can recommend legislation that can have a broad effect on protecting different religious minorities. And here, many of the bills that we've been pushing for relate to China and its mistreatment of Uyghurs, The Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act is a great example where USERF is very heavily pushing for the passage, as well as the Tibet Policy and Support Act as well. So this has been a very high profile form of advocacy that we've done on behalf of prisoners in Xinjiang and in Tibet. As I'm sure many of you know, several of our commissioners were sanctioned by the government of China, so something is probably working in that regard. And finally, we have publications which highlight violators. This is to some extent to inform the policy space so that we're making thoughtful, well-informed decisions, but also to show governments that the United States government is watching. And as the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So we report on prisoners, we'll tweet about prisoner cases and say that we're concerned about it or request information about specific prisoners. And we find that this does have an effect, and governments will actually either pull back on their punishments or their persecution or remove it entirely. So one great example of that is our recent fact sheet on the Saudi Specialized Criminal Court, which regularly imposes very long sentences against dissenters and religious minorities. So these are just three of the ways that we can take some of the information that hopefully all of you are able to provide to us and to Dylan for the victims list and translate it into meaningful policy action that has an impact not only for those individual prisoners, but for entire belief communities or religious communities as well.
Thank you, Scott. We will now open the floor for questions if anyone has a question. If not, we have a couple in store as well. But yeah, so how about you, and then you, and then you. Sorry. So please stand up, yeah, and yes, and try to speak a little loud. And if you would like one of us specifically to answer it, or you're just tossing out there, please do whatever you prefer. Of course.
My name is Tanya Window, and I am the representative for a group in Vietnam, 30 members of the Buddhists who practice in private. The names are Thiên An Ben Bờ Vũ Trụ. On January, I believe February 8th, I have sent found a victim list online, report the incident that they were, detained. I'm not going to be long because I know a lot of people. I'm going to share with you my information. We can follow later. Okay, these 30 people practice a religion called, it's very private, it's called Vũ Hương Dìm Hương. It's a part of that Hòa Hảo, but it's a different sector from all Buddhism. However, they happen to be very famous, they're very talented people, and the reason that they got detained and persecuted is not because of the religion only, but they were asked to convert to the government government Vietnamese Buddhist Association. They refused because they believe in their practice in private. It should not be a concern, but because they were so famous and they are like 2.2 million subscribers in YouTube, and their life is what 20 minutes of their activity every day. They just put on YouTube so people can see how they live. They're not there to preach, but they should see how peaceful their life is. Unfortunately, after the decline to join, so they become a victim of revenge, grudges. So they're facing 9 children aged from 6 months to 9 years old. There's one, the grandmaster is 92 years old, and then the monk and the nuns. Unfortunately, after being declined, they were trapped. They were told that they are potential COVID-19 patients. So they've been they asked to go on the bus and sit on the bus for 3 hours with the closed door, the window closed, no air. So after that, the healthcare people went to the bus, took their temperature, and said, "You have COVID-19 now." So now they're being bused to a quarantine place, and instead of doing COVID-19 testing, they got a blood test and the nose, the swab nose. And after the test, they took the test by force, and they were asked to sign some some documentation that they were not able to read, it was covered with another piece of paper, and they were forced to be slapped in their face. And so 2 days later, somehow on the media said that they are incest family. The DNA test proved that they are related by blood, by relationship, 3 generations, from a 1992 years old to a 4 months old baby, all related.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
for
so
sharing
may I
that.
just say with you,
Make sure we get it in the database.
why don't we stop here, because I don't want to, I know a lot of people would be here, so we can continue later.
This is the case you asked me about.
Yeah,
The
so-
Dayton Online, the Buddhist case, yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, they got arrested in January of 2022, that's correct. So we are currently reviewing that case. I did reach out to a partner to make sure that all the information was there. Like you said, some of those things sounded a bit intimidating, but wanted to make sure that we get the information right. So please get my card at the end today. We'll connect. Of course, yeah.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ali Basif. I'm representing Shia International. Unfortunately, I came late inside and I saw the last slide where I didn't see. Well, by the way, I'm a professor of international law and international politics. I didn't see any mention of Israel and Bahrain. And what I'm seeing there about Saudi Arabia, I didn't see any Shia person persecuted by the Saudi regime there. Only a Christian convert. So, do you have specific policies vis-a-vis states which are U.S. friendly and a different policy of states which are not that U.S. friendly?
Thank you so much for the question. No, all the prisoners in the database are ones that people have submitted for our review. So I don't know if you want to just mention briefly again about the pool of applicants that it's not reflecting the conditions worldwide.
Yeah, so it's not reflective of conditions worldwide, but I will say with Saudi Arabia, I mean, we do have prisoners in the database, and Scott can talk more about this, that are Shia. They were arrested for protesting religious discrimination,
Yeah, I'm only seeing
civil
the
rights
Christian
violations.
convert there, no mention of Shia. The
Yes.
Saudi oil is a Shia oil.
Yes,
It
sir.
comes from the Shia area, and the money spent is not being spent on the Shia.
Mhm.
On the eastern provinces, which are all Shia.
Right.
The money spent is on all the Wahhabis, the friends of the United States. I don't see any mention of those Shiites in the Saudi Shia oil.
Yes,
And
sir.
no
So,
mention of Israel, no mention of India, no mention of Bahrain. Yet another state which is an overwhelming
Yeah, so this
majority-
information here is not
I don't
actually
see
ours.
a case of Bahrain here,
You wanna-
well, a case of Shia majority.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, so these are designed to be illustrative cases, not representative, but we do report extensively on Saudi Arabia and the Eastern Province. We reported on the protests back in 2011, where the government arrested many Shia, including Shia who were minors at the time. There were Shia who were sentenced to death even though they were minors at the time. And on our website, usurp.gov, we have extensive reporting about that. And we've also tweeted about some of those specific cases, like Morteja Claredes, for example, who recently had a reduction in his sentence, but was a very young Shia man who was facing a death sentence at one point. In Bahrain, we also continue to monitor the Shia majority there who face systematic discrimination, or who have faced systematic discrimination, certainly as a result of what happened in 2012. We remain in constant touch with both of these governments about the plight of Shia as well as other religious minorities, but it certainly is on our radar, and we track it very closely.
And you forgot Israel.
yes, hi, would you like?
I know you forgot Israel.
We
have other questions.
we do monitor all the country conditions with special watch list status or CDC status. We don't have any prisoners from Israel.
Any
Thank you very much.
specific reason for that?
Yes. It's mandated by Congress that we report on countries that are special watch list or CPC countries. So let's go to the next question, please.
I am Michelle Nguyen. I'm with the Vietnam Coalition Against Torture. As part of the global campaign for religious freedom of conscience, yesterday morning, more than 10 organizations organized a march for religious freedom of conscience. We visited a dozen of embassies whose name of many appear on the victim list that you just shown, but I want to mention two specific ones, Nigeria and Vietnam. Nigeria recently was removed from the CPC list, who's known for terrible persecution of Christians, and Vietnam who's known for terrible persecution of all religions or religious communities who are not sanctioned or recognized by the government. So what can we do? By we, I mean collectively, not user, but elected officials, State Department, civil societies, individual activists. What can we do collectively to make sure that the countries on the CPC list remain on the list, and the ones who deserve to be on the list be put on the list? Thank you.
So I can't speak in a lot of depth to Vietnam, but in Nigeria, USERF just finally in the post-COVID age sent a delegation to Nigeria. One of our commissioners, Frank Davey, was on that trip, and they met with a number of government officials as well as members of a number of religious minority communities and the US Embassy as well. This is one great example of why USERF's independence is so important, because while the State Department has not listed Nigeria as a CPC for this year, USERF has, on the basis of the evidence that we see, and we've been in constant touch with the State Department about this issue and continue to maintain that communication. We've received inquiries from members of Congress as well. So in terms of collective action, I think these are things that people are concerned about, and continuing to have those meetings on Capitol Hill can be a useful way to continue to raise the facts on the ground as we see them.
Thank you.
Just add quickly on Vietnam, as you know, the U.S. had a binding agreement with them and removed them from the CPC list, and there has been a lot of attention on Capitol Hill for that. And I think any way that civil society groups can be involved in that. There's a Vietnam caucus that's very active, advocating for many prisoners of conscience, different events like that. I think bringing that to different members' attention helps. There's a Vietnam Human Rights Act that's reintroduced every year. It doesn't pass, but it continues to raise the issue. So I think there are opportunities to be involved in that. So, there you go.
My name is Shabir Musli. I'm from Shia International. Gentlemen, you just mentioned about the CPC list. So it sounds like the data that is collected is not independent, basically. It's kind of somewhat restricted to how Congress corrects it. Is that a true statement?
The data is submitted by groups such as yourselves into it, and it's for countries that are designated as countries of particular concern or special watch lists. So these are the most egregious, systematic, ongoing violations taking place. It's about 28 countries.
So your process is not completely independent.
Well, USERF is created by the U.S. Congress, so we are under the legislative branch. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this question is for Jamie. It's a kind of a quick technical question. I saw your vetting process is very comprehensive. I appreciate it. I just try to understand the last step you're talking about, travel to the country to further investigation. How do you prioritize that in terms of time and budget? Limited. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very complicated question. There's a lot of different factors that come in, and thinking behind it. Ultimately, it's guided by our commissioners, and they meet together and kind of set the agenda for the commission each year. I think there's two things we often keep in mind is looking at those countries where the conditions are the very worst, CPC countries, and ways that we can really be making sure we're documenting those violations that are taking place. But at the same time, if we see that there's an opportunity in a country maybe for some sort of change, that there's a door ajar that we could push on, then we would like to take that opportunity too and look for that opportunity to actually bring about change in a place. So that's.
Hi, hello. Thank you for the presentations. I am from Rohingya community from Burma. So I know Burma is in the list, but I have not seen many numbers in it. So, and Rohingya people are persecuted because of their religion as well. So what do you see, is there any cases that we can submit? And then, because I know these different issues and how you stands for the Rohingya and how can we be useful in providing solutions?
Yes, thank you very much. If you provide us names, we will review them. So very much, please give us the names of people who are currently detained or disappeared or in prison. So one of the tricky things with the Rohingya is that unfortunately our database, we're not allowed to document refugee issues. So let's say someone was forced to cross another border based off of religious persecution. Unfortunately, that doesn't fall in the database's mandate based off of the 6 things I mentioned earlier. But please, if you have names, if you know people that are missing or who are detained in Burma, we very much welcome those names. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Victoria. I can use the mic. I from the Galway Today, and I just have a quick question because I love data, I love number. But one thing that we try to encourage people who's like, if you have been an issue by the government, the language barrier is the big thing. So how you get that data and how your data is compared with the State Department, how is it accurate? How do you know that like this actually come from the people that been in charge, like if they like call the accused, and is there a way that you can encourage them to do that, or how to encourage other people to put the data? I saw that you have the form. It's very good for like some of you here that have know somebody that you can put data into it, put their name, the country, the location, if they even listen. Because like some of the Vietnamese people that listen, you can just put that data in there.
Sure, so we use a variety of sources. I would say pretty much every one of our analysts speaks at least 2 languages. So we are doing research in the language locally on top of English language research, although we prefer, just because we're talking to the US government, to try to find English sources when we're doing public outreach. Our sources are a variety of NGOs, local media reports, international media reports. We meet with different organizations when we conduct trips. We meet with governments and hear their perspectives, so we'll have embassy visits, and we're in touch with US embassies on the ground as well to hear what they have to say, to confirm. Our reporting is a little bit different than the Office of International Religious Freedom at the State Department. They tend to report what exactly is happening in sort of a methodical way. Our reports are a bit more analytical and a bit shorter, but we sort of synthesize that information. But we do go through multiple rounds of vetting. We try to find as accurate sources as possible, and we definitely are very careful to not run with a story unless we're pretty confident that it's true, and especially if there's a prisoner involved where there's a potential for harm, and we want to be extra careful. I also just wanted to recognize Trent Martin, who's here for 21 Wilberforce, who is running a project to collaborate on a number of different sources of data on religious freedom, to put them together into a unified database, and that includes USER's CPC and special watch list recommendations. So if you're into data, then definitely listen to that.
Thank you. My name is from the National Organization to Preserve Human Rights. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude for the amazing work that you guys are doing to the source of life. And especially because of the results we see from the my question or comment is that geopolitics also at the universities. The ruling regime in Iran realizes that human rights is their speak. So a lot of the dissidents and religious minorities either vanished or are murdered by plainclothes thugs. So they're not classified as murders by the state. Or they're imprisoned based on false charges. One of them, the most common, is drug trafficking, which carries death penalty. How do we clarify that for the user to include them in your database?
Yeah, so So one of the great things that Dylan has done with the database is to be very specific about the laws under which people are being charged and to try to find specifically where in penal codes the government is appealing to. So sometimes that means looking at court documents that we don't make public, but we try to be as specific as possible and understand how governments are using charges. So terrorism is a great example of this, or propaganda against the state in the case of Iran. So these are not charges that themselves directly relate to religious freedom, but if we see patterns where religious minorities are constantly, systematically being charged with terrorism or money laundering or propaganda against the state, then I think that's enough for us to assess that there is a restriction on freedom of religion happening.
I have a question regarding how users decide to go to any country to visit and to investigate, and what will be the criteria to make such a trip. And in the case that there's a country that they keep denying visa to user commissioners, would that be something that you flag, or maybe there's something not right with this country, so we need to flag them more often or something? Thank you.
So a large extent of what our trips are largely dependent on what our commissioners are interested in. As some of you may know, our commissioners are appointed for 2-year terms. Those can be renewed once, and they're appointed by a combination of the president and the majority and minority leadership in the House and the Senate. So we just had a number of commissioners whose terms have ended, a number of new commissioners who've been appointed. So it'll largely depend on what their specific interests are, where there's potential that a trip could be useful, where it will be clarifying. That's generally the basis that we use to determine where to go.
I have the second part. The second part of my question was that in case, let's say even in 2 different terms, the commissioner is still interested in visit that country, but that country keep denying visa to those commissioners, to users. So will you flag it as a country of special attention or whatever you think that we should, because they keep denying, there's no way for you to go and find out the truth?
Yeah, so we have to do our best sometimes when we're denied visas. There's a couple that we've consistently not been able to visit, but whether or not we designate a country is determined by our legislation. So for countries of particular concern, it's those that have particularly severe violations of religious freedom, which means those that are systematic, ongoing, and egregious. The criteria for that are laid out in our legislation, but it's very similar to gross violations of human rights. For those of you who are familiar, for countries that meet essentially 2 of those 3, those would meet the criteria for a special watch list. So the fact that user was denied a visa for a trip wouldn't necessarily be a reason that we would designate a country, but it would make it more difficult, and I think countries generally only stand to gain when we're able to see firsthand what's happening and hear everybody's side of the story. It just paints a much more nuanced picture, so we do try to encourage that.
Just add, usually if usurp's been denied visas, it's because of something that we've already reported on and put out there in response. So there's several countries like that we've been hoping to get to for many years and has not been a possibility. So.
That was good. Thank you.
This is my question. So I just want to make an acknowledgement that sitting next to you with the empty chair, that picture is Pastor Adao, who actually tried to come to this event, but he's basically now under house arrest after being detained. I believe you served at one point sponsored originating to adopt him. So then I was wondering if you have a statement you would like to make in this particular scenario.
So we are aware of Pastor Adal's situation, and we try to, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, travel to Thailand in order to come to the United States for this conference. We're very disappointed Pastor Adal couldn't make it to the conference. But in terms of what we're doing our best to keep things behind the scenes, make sure that we're not doing anything that would further jeopardize his state, and so we're continuing to monitor him. So thank you. I think we're about almost out of time. If there was one last question, I'd be more than happy to take it. If not, I will say one thing that I'm particularly proud of with this database is the expansion of really what kinds of people are included in the database. And of course, all these individuals have had interconnected human rights are to religious freedom, that religious freedom and freedom of religion or belief cannot fully exist without a very robust civil society that allows freedom. We're aware of several journalists who are imprisoned because they report on sectarian issues or marginalized communities, whether that's Dalits or as well as indigenous communities, as well as land right cases where we see this in Tibet, as well as India again. So the database, like I mentioned earlier, is going to have a lot more functional capabilities so that we can see all these cases together and really try to figure out what to do.
I just have a question about that. Is that list shareable? Is that to the public, or is that only certain people that have option to look at that list of names?
So the full number that we had, which was 1,548, is not completely open. We have 1,534 names currently featured in the database. So that list is public. The website, you can visit our website at usurf.gov. We have a browser that says Prisoners of Conscience, and if you go, it is called the Forbes Victims List. So you type in usurf, you type in Forbes Victims List, it should pop up. And so yeah, with that in mind, thank you all for coming today. It was really great.
Hai câu đi hỏi tiếng tôi một.
We ask if you can take a conversation outside. We have another panel coming in, so we ask if you can vacate the room. We appreciate you being here, but if you'd like to be in our next panel, please stay. What's the next one? We have 10 minutes for our next one, which is a flight Montagnard Christians in Vietnam. So if you would like to stay for that, we ask you to stay in the room. If not, we ask you to please take your conversation outside the hallway so we can set up for our next panel. You're out there.
I want to go get their business card.
Okay.
If you're here for our next panel, please stay. If you're not, we ask you to leave the room so we can set up.
Our session.
Oh, good.
Dạ, mình nói xong thì mình lấy ký ra. Yes, now.
Scott, it's good to see you.
Hey Jimmy, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Are we going to be at the same time?
Oh, yeah. So nice to meet you. Yeah.
They have a really perfect questions I can say.
No, really well.
Yeah, they were very engaged. So
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Session.
Yes, so unfortunately our list, and that's something I should have explicitly said, but
I should have asked it, but I knew that it was
it's okay. We typically include prisoners that are currently in prison. And so unfortunately, I'm sure many of the here in the community have spent a long time in prison, but we don't go backwards. But once they're on their list, they are on the list. So even if they get released, their profiles will remain.
and they don't have to have been in prison for a week or longer or anything like that.
No,
Just as long as you are here.
yes, of course, there doesn't have to be a time.
Thanks, Donna.
Yes, of course.
Good job.
Very nice to meet you. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Đó giờ một cái show 4 rưỡi rồi cha. Ai là cái người chưa mặc áo cha chưa xem tại Tuyết hỏi tôi biết là cha tự cha cho mình một con cha hồi sức cho biết.
He's busy.
Nhờ. Lạnh quá.
Yes.
We have a new one. We have so I think one for you. We'll have two. Oh, and is he coming back?
Yes.
So you one
He was at the 9:30.
He was at the 9:30 this morning.
Về chết rồi. Em nói. That's why I was happy a lot. I do the testimony.
Là cái vừa đúng